Take note that today's shiur, Daf Hey, begins at the top of Daf Hey Omid Beis. In our previous shiur, it was necessary for us to continue from Daf Daled onto all of Daf Hey Omid Aleph, so we're now at Daf Hey Omid Beis at the top. In our previous shiur, we had focused on Shitas Shmuel regarding someone who says Mudrani Mimcha without the additional phrase She'ani Oichel Loch. The conclusion of the Gemara was that if you say Mudrani Mimcha without adding She'ani Oichel Loch, the Mudrani Ani Mimcha phrase alone does not imply a prohibition of eating. The Gemara had explained what Mudrani Mimcha might imply. It said on the bottom of Hey Omed Aleph, 3-4 lines from the bottom, the Gemara said it means that I won't speak with you. This leads us into a topic that you can see on the side. We have a nosei, called a general topic heading, and we indicate that this general topic will go till Daf Zayin Omed Aleph. So we have a rather long topic ahead of us. And the immediate topic, the nosei, is I Yodayim Shein Mochichos Havyon Yodayim. A yad is a partial phrase. We saw this already in the Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta. We also mentioned at the beginning of the Masechta in our introductory words that Nedarim is characterized by terms and phrases that don't lend themselves necessarily to a simple English translation. Rather, we have to become accustomed to terms and how the Gemara perceives what their implication is. So here we're dealing with partial phrases and their effectiveness in binding someone to a vow. The term Yodayim She'enon Mochichos, or if you prefer the opposite, Yodayim Mochichos, would be a partial phrase whose understanding, whose implied understanding is very clear. What about a partial phrase whose understanding isn't very clear? It's ein mochichos. Does it have any relevance? Does it create any obligation, or is one bound as a result of that kind of partial statement that's not absolutely clear? So now, the Gemara at the top of Hey Omid Beis, Leima Kosovar Shmuel, shall we say that Shmuel, based on what he said, that if someone says Mudar ani mimcha, and he doesn't add the phrase She'ani oichelach, Shmuel said it's not obvious that he is restricting himself from any eating benefits. So as a result of that, should we conclude, therefore, that Shmuel is of the opinion, Yodayim she'ein mochichos, lo havyon Yodayim, that partial phrases whose understanding is not clear does not cause any binding or any restriction. Let's take a look at Rashi's explanation at the top. Leima sovar Shmuel Yodayim she'ein mochichos Kidahocha Hoyel v'lo omar mamish shani oichelach. Since he didn't spell out that phrase that I am restricting myself from giving you benefit from eating from me. Since he doesn't say that, amrinan lo mukha milso de b'chila komar. We say it's not obvious from just Mudar Ani Mimcha that the speaker is talking about eating. And as a result of that, there is no eating prohibition. So, should we conclude thusly? The Gemara says, yes, in fact, understand it. Shmuel mokim lo lemas nisin, Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel sets up our Mishnah as a Mishnah based on Reb Yehuda, or that our Mishnah is taught by Reb Yehuda. Omar Yodayim Shein Mochichois Lo Hafion Yodayim, that partial phrases that aren't obvious in their meaning are of no consequence. Disnan, and here we go to a totally different realm of halacha. We're now going into the realm of divorces. A divorce is characterized by a written document, a get, and it says in this source, Gufo shall get, the heart of a divorce document, in addition to the names of the couple that are getting divorced, the following phrase must appear: Harei at muteres l'chol adam, where the husband declares in the text of the divorce document, you are now allowed to marry any man. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, V'dain, and here's a phrase that there's quite a bit of Aramaic in this phrase, V'dain dehavi lichi minoi, and this shall be unto you from me, Sefer Tiruchin Vigeres Shvukin, a text of splitting up, of severing, and a letter of separation, of abandonment, of separation. We take a look at Rashi on the third line from the top. Rabbi Yehuda Omer v'dein di havi lichi dekosavar ilo kosav bei mamish v'dein. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, if you don't write into the text this phrase, v'dein means and this writing, this piece of parchment in which the get is written, if you don't have that phrase which specifies and this text is your document of divorce, lav mukha milsa debahai gita megarish law, it's not obvious as far as Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that this get, that is through this get that he is divorcing her. The Yodayim shein mochichos lo hav Yodayim, because partial phrases that are not absolutely obvious do not constitute anything of legal consequence. So from Rabbi Yehuda's expectation or requirement in a divorce document that things have to be spelled out, is so, we'll say obviously, so clearly, without which it's not going to be effective. You see that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that partial phrases that are or expressions that aren't absolutely clear are therefore not binding. The Gemara asks, what forced Shmuel into setting up the Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda? Lukma karabanan, afalgavdi ein yodayim mochichos. Why couldn't Shmuel have said that our Mishnah is in accordance with the Rabbanan, that hold, even though the partial phrase is not absolutely clear, it still has consequence? We take a look at Rashi. Lukma lemasis karabanan leima. Why doesn't he hold afagav de komar muda ani mimcha o meruchak ani mimcha lechudei, even though he says those phrases by themselves, Ozer b'achila, that results in an eating prohibition, ve'afagav de lo omar shani oichalach, even without saying that, the yodayim shein mochichos havya nedai karabanan, the amri lo tzorch lemichtav beget elo hareyat muteres l'chol adam. So why couldn't Shmuel have said that the phrase Amudar Ani Mimcha alone does ban someone from eating benefit? Very simply, what was it about our Mishnah that forces Shmuel to say what he said, that what he does? That without Shani Ochalach, you've got a case of a partial phrase that's not clear, and therefore it's not binding. It's not binding, certainly with regard to eating. The Gemara answers, Omar Rava, Masnisen Kishisei. There was terminology in the Mishnah that led Shmuel to this single-minded conclusion that the Mishnah is in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to have Yodayim Mochichos in order for it to be a binding vow. And what is it about the Mishnah? Amai Tani Shani Ochel Loch. Notice we've dashed underlined the word loch, or Shani Toem Loch. Toem means to taste from your food, or Ochel is to eat from your food. Listening, Shani Ochel, Shani Toem. Why couldn't the Mishnah have simply said, Mudar Ani Mimcha, Shani Ochel? Why was it necessary to add Loch, meaning you, to specify the party to whom he's speaking? Wouldn't it have been enough to write to say Mudar Ani Mimcha Shani Ochel? Shma mino bo'inon yodayin mochichos. From the insistence on having the word loch in there, you see that things have to be absolutely clear. And if not, if it wouldn't have had loch, I wouldn't have known what the speaker is saying. If we look in Rashi, Lisni Shani Ochel Shani Toem, Lama Li Lameimar Loch. Why did the Mishnah have to say in its example the word loch as well? Elalahachi Kotani Loch. The reason for adding the word loch, meaning to you, the Kosover Yadayim Shem Mochichos Havi about Yadayim. He is of the opinion that if the partial phrase is not absolutely clear, it's not binding. The Kotani Shani Ochel Bilvad V'lo Omar Loch. Had it been phrased without the word loch, lo have mashma de mudar mechavero, I wouldn't have understood that he is being prohibited from benefiting from his friend. De bo'inon yadai mochichos. V'chi omar nami mudrani mimcha v'lo omar shani ochel loch. Had he said mudrani mimcha without shani ochel loch, lo mashma de b'chiluk omar. It doesn't imply eating. Elo de lo mishta'ino b'hadoch. What it would have implied is, I'm not going to be speaking with you. For further elucidation on this particular point of Rava, let's look at the Ran's commentary. You can see the Ran about a third of the way up from the bottom of the wide lines of the Ran. Omar Rava, Masnisik Shisei, Lisni Shani Oichel, V'Shani Toim. Pirush. V'Ihavitoni Hachi below Loch, had the Mishnah taught the neder as Mudarani Mimcha Shani Ochel without the word Loch, Havashaminon, I would have concluded the Yadayim She'ein Mochichos Havin Yadayim. The Afal the Kfar Omar Mudrani Mimcha, even though he said already Mudrani Mimcha. In other words, had the Mishnah taught that a neder like that is a binding vow without the word loch, I would have been able to conclude that Yodayim She'ein Mochichos is considered Yodayim. Shmuel, after all, is of the opinion that the phrase Mudar Ani Mimcha is coupled with the continuation of Shani Ochel. Afilu hachi shani oichel below loch, and nevertheless, by saying shani oichel without the word loch, yodayim shem mochichus ninu, it turns out that it wouldn't be clear. The iko lemeimar hachi komar. If he would have said mudrani mimcha without the word shani oichel loch, without that word loch, I would have thought as follows: mudrani mimcha, I will restrict benefiting from you. Delo mishta'ino b'hadoch. In other words, mudrani mimicha, I won't benefit from speaking with you. I achilna hayom oad yom ploni. If I happen to eat today. So you see how that could have been misconstrued had he said mudrani mimcha shani ochel. It would have led to us concluding that I won't speak with you if I eat today. That's why the word loch had to be added. The time of Yom Loch, the reason that the vow preventing eating benefit takes hold is because he used the word loch. Ha'omar mudrani mimcha shani ochel, had he said just that, lo chayil nidra klal, the neder would not have taken off. Dehavyon lu yodayim she'ein mochichos v'lo havyon yodayim. It's a phrase that's not absolutely clear, and therefore it's not of legal consequence. Let's turn back to the Gemara. Itmar, Yodayim she'ein mochichos. These are partial phrases that are not absolutely clear. On the side of the Gemara, you can see we have a noseh, and we also indicate hemshech. This is a continuation of the topic. Yodayim she'ein mochichos. We're going to see Abaye says havyon yodayim, that it is binding, and Rava says lo havyon yodayim, that it's not binding. Once something can be understood as something else, so it doesn't get off the ground. Now the Gemara. Itmar Yodayim she'ein mochichos. Abaye Omar havyon yodayim, that it is binding. Rava Omar lo havyon yodayim, it's not binding. Omar Rava, Rebbe Idi Asbaroli. Rebbe Idi explained to me. Omar Kra. The pasuk says in Bamidbar Perek Vav pasuk Beis. We wrote in the beginning of the pasuk as well. Ish o isha ki yafli lindor neder nozir lahazir lashem. Makish yodois neziros lenezirus. The pasuk is comparing partial nezirus acceptance to regular nezirus acceptance. Ma nezirus bahaflo, af yodois nezirus bahaflo. Just like the basic acceptance of Nazirus must be behaflaw. Now the word haflaw means clear speech, leaving no room for doubt. So too, the partial speech must be clear. Should we say that the controversy between Abaye and Rava parallels the machlokes that we saw earlier between the Tanakama, between the Chachomim and Rabbi Yehuda that we saw with regard to a get? Desnan, Gufo shoget, Hareat muteres l'chol adam. The heart of the get is that phrase that you are now muter to marry anyone you like. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says you have to add into the divorce document this phrase, V'dein dehavi lichiminoi, and this that you are receiving from me, Sefer Tiruchim v'get Peturin v'gerish shvukin, that this is the document of separation, of splitting our marriage apart. So what do you see? The Tanakama, as the Gemara goes on to suggest, Abaye Domer K'Rabbanan, Abaye who says you don't have to have Yodayim Mochichos, he would go like the Tanakama, the first opinion here, that doesn't require that specification in the document that this is your divorce document. Rava who says that Yodayim she'ein mochichos lo havyon yodayim, Tiyomar Rabbi Yehuda, he would accept the position, he would take the position of Rabbi Yehuda that says you have to spell things out. Omar lo chabaye. At this point, the Gemara rejects this suggestion. The suggestion having been parallel the Amoroyim, Abaye and Rava, with an earlier machlokes Tanoim. Not so. Abaye Omar lo chabaye. Abaye responds, Ano di amri afilu Rabbi Yehuda. My position with regard to Yodayim she'ein mochichos as being Yodayim will conform with the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda will agree with me. Ad kan lokum Rabbi Yehuda bo'in Yodayim mochichos. Up till this point, Rabbi Yehuda requires very explicit terminology. Elo gabi get. It's only with regard to a divorce. The bo'inun krisus v'leka. In the case of a divorce, the break has to be absolute, complete break. And in order to accomplish that complete break between the couple, between this husband and wife, that they are no longer attached to one another whatsoever, you have to add this extra expression. But regarding other topics, do we hear Rabbi Yehuda being so insistent on spelling things out in an absolutely clear fashion? The Rava Omar Anodi Amri Afilu L'Rabbanan. Rava, who says that if it's Yodayim she'ein mochichos, it's not binding, can be in it could be agreement with the Rabbanan that said by the get, even if it's not absolutely specified it still is binding. Up till this point, the Rabbanan said that we were not insistent on having the details spelled out. Elo gabi get. It's only in the case of get do they have this. We'll call this leniency. The Gemara continues at the top of Vov Amud Aleph. The ein Adam megaresh as eshes chavero. When a person is handing a divorce document to a woman, it's obvious that he is handing it to his wife to divorce her. A person doesn't divorce someone else's wife. So the context of the get makes it so obvious as to what is taking place and concerning whom matters are transpiring. Rashi at the top line, by writing, you are hereby muteres to marry any man. It's obvious that he's speaking to his wife. The wife of some other man, she can't divorce her. It's so obvious as to what is taking place, even without spelling out the Vidain expression of Rabbi Yehuda. But regarding vows in general, who says that the Rabbanan would be so lenient to allow Yodayim Shein Mochichos, or to consider that as binding? As we scan ahead in the Gemara, you notice we have triangles, and they're introduced on the side under our mivneh, our topic heading. These are kushos al Abaye. We're going to be challenging Abaye mimakoros debohem roim deboinun yadayim mochichos, from Tanaic sources where it seems that the phrase, the partial phrase that a person uses, has to be absolutely clear in order for it to be binding. The double underline that follows at each juncture represents a response. Number 1. So we're going to present a triangle we call triangle number 1, and within that there'll be a give and take, and there'll be 2 responses of Abaye that follow. The Gemara, Meisvei, Hare hu alai, Hare ze alai. If a person uses that expression, Ozer, Mitnei shu yad lekorban. A person is referring to some item, and he says that it is upon me. What is the result of that phrase? It makes the item prohibited, because it is tantamount to his saying that the item is unto me like a sacrifice. We look into the Rosh, yes, at the first line, Harehu alai. Gon shoya kikar munach lefonov. The person was located in front of a loaf, or there was a loaf in front of him. And he said the following, one of these expressions, that Harehu alai, this is upon me, or Hare ze alai. The source tells us that the loaf will become usher to him, as we explained, because he is using a phrase that's considered a yad lekorban. He's declaring the loaf of bread unto himself forbidden like a sacrifice. A sacrifice, of course, is something that one dedicates to the Beis Hamikdash, and it's then becomes sanctified, and certainly you cannot derive any personal benefit from it. So by saying Harehu alai, and there's some item lying in front of you, maybe a loaf of bread, it's tantamount to your prohibiting yourself from benefiting from that item. Now Gemara goes on. Taima diomar alai hu de Ozer. He had to spell out the vow by saying it is upon me. And that's what makes the vow into a vow. Avolo amar olai lo. But without saying olai, I wouldn't know that he is vowing. Rashi says on the 4th line from the top, Avolo ko amar olai lo darehu. If he would have said just harehu, lo mashma klum, it has no implication. The bo'inon yodayim ochichos. We need to have your partial phrase having clarity. So is this then not a tiyufta d'Abaye? Is this then not a refutation of Abaye's position? Omar loch Abaye. Abaye responds, this is not a refutation. Taimo diomar alai, by having added the word alai, I conclude who the Ozer. Aval omar harehu v'lo omar alai. Had he said harehu but not included the word alai, harehu de hefker, harehu de tzedakah ka'omar. It would imply something else. And therefore the insistence on the olai is not because without that you have a case of yodayim shemochichos that simply is not binding, but rather because harei zeh or harei hu would have led me to conclude something else altogether. The Gemara asks, V'ho mitnei shu yad l'korban kotani. Let us take a look at the Rashi. V'ho mitnei shu yad l'korban komar the Ozer kekorban. The expression harei olai is binding because it's considered a partial expression that implies prohibition like a sacrifice. V'lo motzis amris litzdaka lehefker have mashma. You can't say that by saying harei hu it would have implied a declaration of hefker. Hefker means to declare something unowned or a vow to give charity. Let's also look at the Rosh. The Rosh adds a little more clarity here. We're looking at the Rosh toward the beginning of his commentary. V'ho mitnei shu yad l'korban kotani v'al korchach harei hu ve'a harei zeh koi. The expression in the Tanaic source that we saw 3 lines from the top, namely that the vow is binding because it's a yad l'korban, is going specifically on the phrase harei hu or harei zeh, not a reference to the word olai. The olai lo have a yad. The word olai is not a partial expression. Elo gorem larei hu sheyochol lios yad. It activates the harei hu term to be a yad. V'kevan dekoi aharei hu v'harei zeh. And since the seifa is referring to that, mashma de pshita le diyad l'korban have. It's obvious. It's simple. It's obvious to the Tana that harei hu is a reference to prohibition like a sacrifice. There's no room for thinking that he's trying to declare something hefker unowned or something as charity. The hamakdish korban o harei zeh korban o harei hu. When a person sanctifies something as a sacrifice, he will say harei hu korban or harei zeh. Hilkoch hamatvis beloshon zeh daito nami korban. When a person speaks and says harei hu or harei zeh, it's very clear that he is referring to a sacrifice, not hefker or tzedakah. Even though harei zeh or harei hu is rather clear that he's referring to a sacrifice, nevertheless it says olai. Almo time of the Gemara olai. So we see from here that it's only because he adds the word olai, that makes it very clear. Avol below hoichocha lo have yad afagav the daite akorban v'lekelu svuki b'midi achrini. So with that explanation in mind, the response of Abaye was that I need the olai, because otherwise harei hu would have implied hefker or tzedakah. That's unfounded, because of the text itself indicating that the harei hu or the harei zeh expression is a reference to sacrifices. Ela ema. So we have to go back and try to defend Abaye in light of this kasha, the source seeming to indicate that without the word olai, I have an example of yodayim shein mochichos, and it wouldn't have been binding, whereas Abaye would have told you it is. So elo ema taimodema olai hu de asur v'chavero mutar. By adding the word olai, it makes it such that I am prohibited from benefiting from the item, and someone else, however, is allowed to benefit from the item. Avo omar harehu, if he would have said simply that, harehu, shnehem asurin, the dilma harehu hektish ka'omar. Because by saying harehu, the implication is he is declaring it as hektish. Hektish being something that's forbidden to everybody. Hektish is a sanctification of the item. So, just to review the defense of Abaye, we thought that the Tanaic source said you have to add the word olai, because without that, nothing would have taken hold. And that would have been a kasha on Abaye. Namely, that harehu would have been an example of yodayim she'ein mochichos. It's a partial phrase that lacks clarity, lacks preciseness, and therefore, according to the source, without the olai, it would have been non-binding, and that would have been a problem for Abaye. So the source, by saying you've got to have the word olai, indicates without it you've got yodayim shein mochichos lavin yodayim. Abaye says not so. The word olai is necessary to dispel an alternative vow binding conclusion. The word olai is needed to dispel a mistake I would have made. Once again, it's not simply because harehu is a partial phrase lacking clarity. That in and of itself wouldn't have meant that there's no vow. Why then was it necessary to add olai? Because without olai, I would have thought that the speaker is sanctifying the item, thereby prohibiting it to be benefited by all. He therefore had to say olai to indicate that it's being prohibited only upon himself, but others are able to benefit. Meisvei, harezu chatos harezu asham. If a person says that, he declares an animal be a sin offering or a guilt offering, even though the speaker is someone that is guilty of or obligated to bring a chatas or an asham. He, for example, is a person that had eaten blood of eating blood of animals is a prohibition that, if done unwittingly, obligates a person to bring a chatas, a sin offering. So a person like that had in fact eaten animal blood, and he says harezu chatos, it's meaningless. Harezu chatosi, harezu ashami. If he says this is my sin offering or my guilt offering, im hoya mechuyev dvorav kayomim. If he is a person that had been obligated to bring it, then by saying harezu chatosi, that will obligate him. That will in effect sanctify the item. Tiyufta da Abaye. Is this not then a refutation of Abaye? Meaning that without the extra element of clarity, if you have this, what we would call yodayim she'ein mochichos, the source indicates lomar klum. That would be a refutation of Abaye. If we look at the Ran, second line from the bottom, Tiyufta Abaye, Tohavadai Yad She'eno Mochiach Mi Ohave. By saying Harezu Chatos, it is a partial expression. It's at least that the Kevan de Mechuyev Chatos, since the person himself had eaten blood, as an example, he's chayav to bring a sin offering. Harezu Chatosi Komar. By saying Harezu Chatos, in effect he's saying this is my Chatos, and yet the source says Lo Amar Klum. So you see a problem for Abaye. Omar Loch Abaye. Ha Mani Rebbe Yehuda He. Mai tells you that this source is in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. And I said what I said in accordance with the Rabbanan. Now, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan, if you recall, they spoke up in the context of a divorce document, where Rabbi Yehuda said, you've got to spell things out. You have to add that v'dein di havi lechi, etc. expression. So a source that's insistent on such specificity and preciseness and clarity, that's in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. But I, who said that you don't need that level of clarity in order to be binding, I am in accordance with the Rabbanan. The Gemara asks, for Abaye Huda Omar, but Abaye himself said, back in that discussion, back on Daf Yomi base, we have a little star, if you want to find where that was cited. Abaye there had said, Abaye Huda Omar, Ano Diamri Afilu Rabbi Yehuda. My position is a position that even Rabbi Yehuda would agree with. And now you're telling me that I, Abaye, say what I do only within the Rabbanan, not within Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says, Hodar Bey. Abaye retracted from that claim that his point of view was in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda as well. So he's retracting from that. And Abaye is in effect saying that the position I'm taking, that Yodayim Shein Mochichos is Yodayim, that's something only the Rabbanan would agree with. But Rabbi Yehuda, just like in the case of divorce documents, you have to have absolute clarity, so too in vow taking as well. You have to have absolute clarity. The Gemara continues, Elo Leimo Rava D'Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Should we say that just like Abaye is limiting himself to Shitas Harabonon, Abaye's Bar Plukta, Abaye's adversary, namely Rava, that he is limited to Rabbi Yehuda? Rava, who said you have to have Yodayim Mochichos, is in general, in vows, that's an opinion that's limited to Rabbi Yehuda. Amarloch Rava will say, not so. My opinion is not restricted to Rabbi Yehuda. My idea that you have to have Yodayim Mochichos in general, in vows, is something that the Rabbanan would agree with. Up till now, we see the Rabbanan saying you don't have to have that exceptional clarity. Elo Gabi Get. Where are the Rabbanan lenient in there, or where are they of that opinion that you don't have to have exceptional clarity? That's in the case of the get, of the divorce document, because of the obvious surrounding circumstances. A person doesn't divorce someone else's wife. The person is handing a get in which it says, Harei at muteris l'chol adam, you are hereby muter to everybody. Obviously, he is divorcing his own wife. There's no room for any doubt about that. Aval bi'alma, but in general, in the general realm of vows, Bo'inon Yodayim Melchichos. You have to have clear speech. That your partial expression has to be very clear. Otherwise, if there's some alternative meaning to what you say, to what you're saying, it will not be binding. Now, it comes out then, according to this Gemara, that Abaye and Rava are in effect arguing within the Shita of the Rabbanan. That namely, vows in general, according to the Shita of the Rabbanan, do you have to have clarity? According to Abaye, no, you don't have to have absolute clarity. According to Rava, the Rabbanan will tell you in vows, with regard to vows in general, you do have to have absolute clarity. As far as Shitas Rabbi Yehuda is concerned, Abaye concedes that just like Rabbi Yehuda requires absolute clarity with regard to Gittin, he requires likewise with regard to all vows. And of course, Rava, of the holding that all Tanoim will agree with him, agree with that analysis of Rebbe Yehuda. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.